Major funding for these programs has been provided by grants from Capital One Bank and Perfect Building Maintenance, Murray Hill Properties, SJP Properties, Greenberg Traurig, New York Community Bank, Bank of America. Additional funding for these programs has been provided by grants from Akron Gold Brothers, LLC, C.B. Richard Ellis, City Investment Fund, Cushman & Wakefield, Eastern Consolidated, XL Realty Advisors, LP, Essex Capital Partners, First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, GVA Williams, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, Helmsley Spear, Herbert J. Sims and Company, Herrick Feinstein, LLP, Jackson Development Group, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, John Katsimatidis, Kilroy Metal Products, Marcus and Millichap, Massey Knackle Realty Services, M&T Bank, Madison Realty Capital, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Muss Development, Palin Enterprises, Rosenthal and Rosenthal, Signature Bank, Sheldrake Organization, Sterling and Sterling, Stephen Napolitano, Stonehenge Partners, Studley, the Moynihan Organization.
Hello, my name is Michael Stoller, host of the Stoller Report, Real Estate Trends in the Tri-State Region. You know, we're in a tough economy. As one of my guests said, this is the worst dislocation of the capital markets in his lifetime. So I have assembled a group of three prominent real estate individuals and one prominent New York City executive from the EDC to say what's happening in Lower Manhattan during this credit crisis and the world that we're in. My guests today include Larry Silverstein, president of Silverstein Properties, Ken Swig, president of Swig Equities, and Hemsley Spear and a couple of others, Francis Greenberger, chairman of Time Equities, and last but not least, Seth Pinsky, president of New York City Economic Development Corporation. You know, these guys have been on the show, so tell me, what do you see happening? You know, you recently, how many months ago were you made president of EDC?
About 7 or 8 months ago.
So what's happening? We're not talking Willard's Point, we're not talking Coney Island, we're talking about what's happening in Lower Manhattan today.
Well, what we're clearly seeing is dislocation in the market. The office tenants right now are standing on the sidelines waiting to see how the recent events are going to shake out. We're seeing something of a mismatch between expectations on the landlord and tenant side, both on the residential and commercial side. That being said, what we're not seeing so far is panic in the market. Development projects are continuing to move forward. Some of the timelines are slipping. Some of the costs are having to be adjusted. And we're certainly having to negotiate carefully with our counterparts on the projects that we're working on to ensure that the projects can continue to move forward. But what we're seeing generally is a wait-and-see attitude. I think everyone acknowledges that there are going to be difficulties in this market, that you can't go through events like we've been through over the past couple of months without having implications on a city like New York. But long-term, we and our development partners remain bullish on the city and Lower Manhattan in particular.
Francis, I mean, you've been in Lower Manhattan a number of years, not as much as Larry, about the same time that Larry has been there. And, you know, we were talking when you were able to buy buildings at $5 a foot in the early 90s. Ken started a little too late, but he wasn't too far. And now you have a planned hotel with a hotel and condo tower. You have the conversion where you're doing the office condominiums and some other things. What do you see happening in Lower Manhattan today?
Well, I think clearly there is some wait and see going on. Seth's observations are certainly true. On the other hand, and I'm not one who likes to blow smoke or overly optimistic, but there's still a pace of business going on throughout the city. We don't have any, as an example, on Maiden Lane this year, I don't know, we're completely sold out at this point, probably sold 150,000 feet of space.
Of office condominiums.
This year, and the last closing was maybe a month ago. We don't have any product currently on the market residentially downtown, but we have a variety of product around other parts of Manhattan. And I can tell you in the last week, we sold a variety of apartments, probably $5 or $10 million worth, which is a significant...
which is a very positive sign, which I'm a little surprised because
we sold a loft on West 22nd Street for $3 million. We sold an apartment in the East Village. This is all last week. An apartment in the East Village for $1.3 million. Two apartments on the Upper West Side, 93rd Street, one for $1.2 million, one for $700,000. So
people are still in business.
People are still in business. Clearly, everybody has the same thing on their minds. We're all concerned about what's going on. Obviously, our customers are too. But we are not shut down in the way that perhaps some of the banking industry is.
The banking is shut down. Yeah. There is no question. But Ken, I mean, how much square footage of office space do you have?
I will tell you, I closed a loan yesterday. Closed a loan
from a commercial bank.
From a commercial bank in New York.
How much space do you have? Office space do you have downtown now? 3.5?
About 4 million feet.
4 million square feet. And how do you see the office market today? I mean, is there some vibrancy?
We signed 2 leases last week, which was nice. We don't have that much space available right now. And I think that's frankly symptomatic of the entire city, and particularly downtown. The vacancy rate happens to be lower than Midtown right now. So if we were in a booming market right now, and certainly we're not, but if we were, you'd see probably 30–40% reduction of the amount of leased office space this year versus last year, simply because last year broke all kinds of records. And we went from about 11.5% plus or minus to about 7.5% vacancy rate. To do that and duplicate it again would be a statistical impossibility because you'd have to be down to about 2%, which is impossible. So the natural pace of leasing was going to be decreased this year, even in a good market. But there are still tenants out in the marketplace, and they're still leasing. But everybody certainly is more cautious.
Okay, and what about, I mean, you're doing the conversion at 25 Broad. What's happening there?
Well, that I think is a more unique position because I think that is not necessarily reflective of the marketplace. It happens to be that Lehman Brothers is or was my lender. So that particular project has unique circumstances in that we don't know who the lender or the piece of the debt right now is in a bankruptcy court. But what you're seeing in activity-wise, at least, prior to, let's say, 9/14, when Lehman announced that they would go in bankruptcy, there was, a good amount of activity down there. We were on a very good pace.
And I'd like anyone to chime in, but I'll make sure that Larry talks. What's happening with retail downtown? I mean, some of the articles, which I didn't write, were saying that with the terrible economy today, like Hermes might not stay there. But I mean, Hermes is still there, Tiffany's is still there, BMW is still there. I mean, downtown is great new tenants.
Well, I think, first of all, if you're looking at a compressed period of time, and you look at last July and you're going to go forward for the next year, so a 20-month period, let's say, it's not a booming opportunity to go buy lots of retail. But these tenants came downtown for many, many reasons. One is that it's the wealthiest neighborhood in America on a per capita income basis per zip code. Okay? By day, it's number 1. It's number 2 now, but by night. Mountain View, California happens to be second. So they came down to one of the wealthiest areas in America to do their business, and they didn't sign 2-year leases. They signed multi-year leases, 10, 15-year leases. So I don't think they're leaving downtown as anybody else would be leaving Midtown. I think the same economic problems are both Midtown and downtown. But what you're seeing retail-wise is there was a huge growth of new retail activity that was never there really before. From Hermes to Tiffany to Canali to Thomas Pink to Maison de Chocolat to BMW. I mean, it's become the new Madison Avenue.
And I think it's also important to remember why these retailers are located in Lower Manhattan. It's not just for the office tenant, as you were saying. And even on the office side, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of workers still that are in Lower Manhattan, and that with office space that's full, but you also have a neighborhood now that has 55,000 plus residents who live in it. You have people coming to visit from all over the world. I think last year it was over 15 million people visited Lower Manhattan, which is an exponential growth.
Second highest tourist traffic
and I hate to take
Square.
that lead in. A lot of them are going there to see what Larry Silverstein is building. How many years have you been downtown?
Many. Many.
Okay, but you're the man who said to me a couple of months ago that this is the worst capital dislocation ever.
That's
so
correct.
So what are you seeing? I mean, Seven World has become a great success. You're working on the Freedom Tower, the other properties. What do you see happening today?
We have never experienced what we're experiencing today from the standpoint of capital markets. It's extraordinary. And hopefully we'll never see this again. I think what clearly needs happening is confidence has to be restored. And once you get that confidence restored, I think the world will begin to change and become much, much more stable. And people have a much better feeling psychologically and in reality. What we're going through is clearly a diminution in need for office space. There will be significant layoffs, particularly in the financial district. Financial services climate is being affected. So what's going to happen? We're going to lose 20,000, maybe 30,000 jobs, maybe even 40,000 jobs.
I mean, as I said to you before, Larry, in Clarion says we're going to lose 180,000
Well, the question
jobs.
is where? I mean, if it's
in
around
New
the
York
country,
City.
or just New York City.
New York City, Ian Clarion said by 2010, 180,000 jobs.
Well, it could be, when you stop to think about it, if you lose 180,000 jobs, I don't know what I haven't seen that number, so I can't comment on the accuracy of it. If you lose 30 or 40,000 financial sector jobs, financial services jobs, that has a ripple effect on usually a 2 or 3 to 1 basis. So it could become a much larger number. But in terms of the space that we deal with on a daily basis, and the space that we will be dealing with as we rebuild the Trade Center, if you have 30 or 40,000 people at 200 square feet per person, right, which is standard. So what are you talking about? 8 million square feet, 9 million square feet, 10 million square feet? That may become available on a sublease basis. If you look at the total stock in New York, we've got 400 million square feet in total of office space, right? If you look at another 10 million square feet coming online, the percentage is what is it, 1/4%? I mean, it's not material in any way.
But I'd like anyone to chime in. As I said before the show, AIG and Merrill Lynch occupy 6.5 million square feet of Lower Manhattan. How much space is in Lower Manhattan today?
About 98 million feet, plus or minus.
But they still represent that 6% of Lower Manhattan.
But you're saying they're going to be.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that. Let's look at it this way: AIG and Merrill Lynch occupy this amount. Goldman Sachs is going to move from their other buildings into their new building.
Are you assuming that Merrill Lynch is going to vacate?
No, I'm not assuming anything.
That's
just
the point.
All I'm trying to say is that I believe part of that, with the consolidation of Bank of America, they'll move some of it. I mean, part of the space. AIG,
Michael,
who knows? I hope
way,
AIG is in fine shape, but I don't know.
You're right. First of all, 100,000, 120,000 jobs lost is devastating to New York, period. It's terrible for the individuals, and it's terrible for the collective. I don't want to diminish that at all. It's a terrible thing. But if we look at 3 major downturns in New York City, the 70s, 89 to 91, and just the year 2001.
Larry and I were too young. We didn't know about the 70s.
But in the 70s, we lost 768,000 jobs and on the verge of bankruptcy. 89 to 91, we lost 350,000 jobs. And in a 9-month compressed period from March 01 to December 01, we lost 250,000 jobs. 9.8% of the entire United States job market was lost here. Plus, we were physically attacked, right? In perspective, 100,000, 120,000 jobs for a deep recession post-World War II is the least amount of jobs of any of these 3 post-World War II recessions that we have. And when we went into this, we went into this lower in our unemployment than the other 3 periods of time. So it doesn't mean things are good. What it means is that I think New York has more absorption ability to be able to accept the major job layoffs.
And we should also remember a difference between the first two that you cited, the last and this, which is that in the 70s and the early 90s, the city was in horrible shape.
Right.
We had stopped investing for years in our infrastructure. Crime was running rampant. People were leaving the city. What you have now is, thankfully, I believe, a mayor who has continued to invest in the city, has continued to make this a place that people want to be. And that has led the talent to come here. And as long as the talent here is here, eventually the jobs and the businesses will return. And one thing that the mayor has said very clearly is that he is not going to allow through this downturn us to slip into the same bad habits that we slipped into earlier. And one of the reasons why I think the recovery in 2001 was as rapid as it was because we were in a very different place as a city than we had been in some of these earlier situations.
Exactly. That downturn, we came back, frankly, within 4 or 5 months into '02, the market started to shift back already. It was a pause more than a massive downturn at that time.
I was reminded, some of you remember David Goldstick, a voice from the past, but he was a very smart man. And I remember one was somewhat downturn or whatever, and he was talking to, I think, a group of prospective co-op buyers. And he talked about the natural attributes of the city. Its proximity, for instance, to 200 miles of the best beaches in the world. Its proximity to some of the most beautiful countryside in the world. Its incredible art and cultural infrastructure and resources. We know that over the last decade, all of those attributes have attracted the world here. And many people, rich people as well as less rich people, but we've all seen the fantastic sums of money that people will pay for large apartments to live here. We haven't lost that. That attraction is still here. And yes, we're going to go through a difficult period, and yes, we're going to have an economic cycle. But the fundamentals of what makes New York work and what makes it so attractive have not been lost. And people will continue to want to be here and will recover from whatever the interim cycle is.
Larry?
And Francis, your point is right on target, because if you just see what we're facing today, it's major, it's very significant. Dislocation, a huge amount, and will affect people's lives in a very definitive way. But I bring you back to the experience we had in 1990 as opposed to today, because in 1990 we sat with about 65 million square feet of brand new see-through office buildings, totally unoccupied. And at that time, the motto was, stay alive to 95, because the thought was if you made it to 95, you'd survive. And the fact of the matter is, we made it to 95 and survived quite well. And so among the things we are witnessing today, you talk about fundamentals, Seth, by golly, New York, Lower Manhattan, has 13 mass transit lines feeding it. You have buses, you have ferries, you have mass transit that is superb. You also have a residential community, which never existed before, but you got 55,000 families living down there today. It's growing at the fastest rate of any community in this city. And your point, Kent, with respect to the wealth in this community is unprecedented. So you look around, you realize, add all to all of this the fact that we're going to be spending about $20 billion in rebuilding the Trade Center. And it's happening and will continue to happen. The advent of that kind of investment in this 16-acre area in Lower Manhattan has got to have a powerful effect on everything down there.
I'm not disagreeing. I just want to bring up, Francis brought up, people spending money on things, and I know that the three of you are planning in different phases of major hotels. Four Seasons, a unnamed 5-star, 2 5-star hotels or 5.5-star hotels. Right now, my question is, and I do believe that New York City, and I did this on 1010 Wins, I believe that the 5-star hotels are needed throughout the city because we don't have that much. Mm-hmm. And foreigners are still coming here, even though the Irish are not doing as much. What about all of the other budget hotels which are planned for downtown Manhattan? Do you see these things happening?
If you want to talk about a 1 year to 2 year cycle, then we could be depressed. If you want to talk about New York City, which the question is, a little bit
right.
longer
No,
cycle.
today we're really talking, Kent, more about Lower Manhattan.
Okay, but I'm saying Lower Manhattan. Here's a scoop. Highest tourist traffic behind Times Square is on Broad and Wall Street. Now, take a little tiny island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean called Hawaii, where Pearl Harbor is, and how many millions and millions of people go there just to pay respects to what happened there on December 7th, right? Take a look now at the only other place really that the United States was physically attacked, which happened to be, sadly and terribly, New York City. Okay? And look when the memorial goes up and how many millions of people will be coming here on top of the millions of people that are already here. And it will answer the question of why one needs more hotel rooms. Because it is a highly trafficked population already. Business community is growing in there, thankfully. Not necessarily now, but it had been. And you're going to have you're going to add on top of a tourist traffic population one of the memorials that, first of all, everybody can get to New York a lot easier than Hawaii, and everybody wants to go to New York all the time, and it's going to add a huge amount of population in there. So there will be that kind of stimuli in the marketplace for hotel traffic, for retail traffic, et cetera. So
and
long term, it's needed.
You'll have the memorial on top of at least 10 million more square feet of office space just on the Trade Center itself. You have cultural institutions which are either new or expanding. You have new retail opportunities down there. South Street Seaport is going to be redeveloped.
Speaking about the Seaport, what's happening there? I mean, general growth is, as we would say, in dread. They're in major trouble. Okay, what's going to happen with the Seaport? I mean, this is such a great asset.
It is a great asset.
It's a great asset, you know, with great opportunities. What's happening?
We're working very closely with General Growth. We have an agreement in principle with them that we're taking through the city's land use review process. We hope that by the end of next year that it will have come out of the land use review process and that work can begin there. We're looking to significantly expand the retail there. We're looking to build new hotel rooms there. We're looking to create new amenities for the community, turn it into something that's less just an attraction for tourists and more an attraction for the 50,000+ people who live in Lower Manhattan. And we're confident that it's going to get built. It's something that General Growth, that is of interest to General Growth and would be of interest to any developer.
I think that's the key. Any developer, because we're not certain with this capital markets and everything else and what General Growth has done in their own financial condition, if it will be General Growth. Hopefully it will, but somebody should take that asset. I mean, look at your property in Maiden Lane. It's right over there, and your property's over there. I mean, the Seaport is a great...
It's a great anchor
asset
on the east side to
is.
what Larry's doing on the west side.
Battery Park is, I think, one of the greatest urban developments in this country. The amenity that was created is just extraordinary. I live in Greenwich Village, next to Washington Square Park, but when I take my kids out on the weekend, we often go down to Battery Park because it's such an amazing place and full of a variety of things that families and children like to do.
And the city is working on a similar development on the east side now.
Exactly, and we have the Seaport, and we have, you know, East River plans that are being in early states of discussion.
I have a daughter who has just moved from Scarsdale to Lower Manhattan, 2 blocks north of 7 World Trade Center. She's there with her family, kids, and the whole 9 yards. She's the neighborhood, she says, fantastic. The excitement, the vibrancy, the vitality of it is just a pleasure. And we were there. We spent a little time there Saturday and Sunday over this past weekend. And we looked around. It was just, it's a young community, right? Young people, people your age, and it's just the vitality of it is such a spectacular thing to experience when you're down there. And one of the things, you know, that's going to further change this area. Yes, we're going to be adding back at least 10+ million square feet at the Trade Center, but part of that footage will be 500,000 square feet of destination, first-class quality retail. So you'll have big boxes, little boxes, department stores, retail of every type and description, and it will have an enormously positive impact on the people who live there.
You know, I think with regard to retail, and I have to bring this up to my audience, the highest sales per square foot in the world is in downtown Manhattan in retail at Century 21. more people go to Century 21. You know, you talk about tourists. Everybody who's there goes to Century 21. It's
an institution.
It's an institution, and you know, it's.
If you don't want to buy anything, you still visit it.
I think what Larry's saying, and one of the things we as developers know, but even we have to conceptualize it, is we know that when you build something somewhere, it redefines the location. It gives it a totally different experience than when it's what it was before or an empty lot. Downtown has a lot of things going for it right now. Battery Park and Wall Street and the revival and all these things. But when Larry gets finished, the impact of that extraordinary new development and all of the amenities that go with it are going to make an enormous, you know, that's going to be a whole, we're in a good place from a community point of view now, but that's going to make a whole push forward. Downtown, you know, when I first started looking downtown and becoming more familiar with it 20-odd years ago, whenever it was, I would go down there on Saturday and Sunday and walk around, and, you know, there was hardly a person, except there were people who looked like they weren't from New York, and they weren't, because what I discovered was that for a long time it was a tourist destination, and many of us didn't realize it. The tourists, as Ken said, have been coming there for a long time, and they're going to come even more because of what Larry's doing and all the new things that are going on there. So I think, you know, we're going through a bump, but the ascendancy of downtown is going to continue and be very dramatic.
One of the things to recognize, the port today announced the new timetable and the determination to move ahead and get this thing done. Part of it is the decision to build the new path terminal. It's a design by Santiago Calatrava, which is absolutely extraordinary in terms of its impact. When you look at the design itself, you realize the majesty and the beauty of this building. There is another Calatrava building in America. It's on the lakefront of Lake Michigan in Milwaukee. And we flew out there just to look at this museum. Spectacular building. And what we're going to have is a replica of that and the power that it will attract.
So in conclusion, because we finished 30 minutes, I think everyone here is saying we're in tough economic times, but the future is bright for downtown. And I think with 3 developers and with a great president of New York City Economic Development Corporation, it's going to be there. I'd like to thank Larry Silverstein, Ken Swig, Francis Greenberger, and Seth Pinsky. The week after, we're talking about the office market in New York, and that's going to be a very interesting show. See you in a week.
Major funding for these programs has been provided by grants from Capital One Bank and Perfect Building Maintenance, Murray Hill Properties, SJP Properties, Greenberg Traurig, New York Community Bank, Bank of America. Additional funding for these programs has been provided by grants from Akron Gold Brothers, LLC, C.B. Richard Ellis, City Investment Fund, Cushman & Wakefield, Eastern Consolidated, XL Realty Advisors, LP, Essex Capital Partners, First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, GVA Williams, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, Helmsley Spear, Herbert J. Sims and Company, Herrick Feinstein, LLP, Jackson Development Group, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, John Katzimatidis, Kilroy Metal Products, Marcus and Millichap, Massey Knackle Realty Services, M&T Bank, Madison Realty Capital, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Muss Development, Palin Enterprises, Rosenthal and Rosenthal, Signature Bank, Sheldrake Organization, Sterling and Sterling, Stephen Napolitano, Stonehenge Partners, Studley, the Moynihan Organization.